Okay, hello everyone. Look, I've actually got Alice here in person. She's actually in the Shiatsu Centre. It's just so lovely, isn't it, to actually be physically in the same space?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks ever so much for taking some time to join this webinar. We've got, hopefully it'll be interesting. We're going to do some practical work. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's start. Yeah, just say hi in the chat.
Yeah, it was Bob. Hello, Bob. Hello, Nathan. Wolfgang.
Oh, wow, look at that. Look at this. Wow, we've really got a busy chat. Oh, Gabriella, look at that. Okay, Aniota's there. Great. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for tuning in. Look at that. Yeah, we've hopefully, well, we're going to have a great time, and hopefully you will too. Here we go. So it's we thought we'd do a webinar on Kishi and the evolution of Shiatsu Touch, and also to kind of share the information about your book club that's coming up, which we'll go into in a minute. So this is the program. We're going to do introductions. I'm going to introduce Alice to you, and if you don't know anything about me, I'll say a few things about myself. And then we're going to talk about Kishi and Pauline Sasaki, because that's tradition and descent, we called it, didn't we? Because there definitely was a lot of change in Shiatsu around that time with Kishi and Pauline.
There was a lot of tradition and a lot of dissent.
There was a lot of dissent and a lot of tradition. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we're going to go into some Seiki, and I'm really interested to have you work on me and just experience that. And also because I've experienced Seiki in the past, I'm fascinated to know exactly what goes on, how you actually do it. So I'm going to try and ask you that.
Put you on the spot.
If that's possible. And then I thought maybe I could work on you, and we can just talk about diagnosis, and I can actually show you how Kishi's work with Pauline influenced the Zen Shiatsu diagnosis approach. So that'd be interesting, yeah. And that ties in with what we're doing next week, which is we're doing a whole session on advanced diagnosis. So more about that later. And then there's a bit about your book club, which again is a really interesting new idea, which we'll find out more about later. Okay, so here we go. Introductions. Okay, so here she is in actual personage. And you did study with Kishi, and you did Shiatsu training first of all.
I studied with you.
Yes. With the Shiatsu College.
Lest it be forgotten.
No, that's right. Important. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I studied with Shiatsu
College. I wrote to Cliff when I was 19. I don't know. No, I was a bit older than that by then. I was probably about 22. Yeah. And I said, how do I study Shiatsu? You probably don't remember that.
I do actually. I remember, yes, because I can remember you being at Grimstone Manor, which is where we used to run residentials. And I remember you being there in the background. Cooking mainly, that's right. Yeah, I can remember that. That was a long time ago. It must have been
85.
Right, there we go. Right, so we go back a long way. And but then you kind of really got interested in Seiki, didn't you? And that's your kind of speciality now. But you also are author of Mind Clearing, a book, Mind Clearing, and author of the famous book Life and Resonance, which is
co-author,
of course, of Life and Resonance, because Kishi wrote that, obviously. And you're a teacher and Seiki practitioner. Anything to add to that you think is important?
Well, I mean, what's important there about me and Seiki? I was doing. I started. Yeah, there is something important about the connection with Pauline, but maybe we'll talk about that later.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's me. Look, I'm actually doing some Shiatsu there. And if you didn't know, I was apprenticed by Pauline Sasaki, and that's important because she was apprenticed by Kishi, which we'll talk about later, and she was very influenced by Kishi. I did study with Kishi actually before I met Pauline, and I did some workshops with him. It was all a bit of a mystery at the time. Hopefully, I know a little bit more about what's going on.
Early 80s?
Early 80s, yeah.
Yeah, when he was really mysterious.
Yes, he was
really doing that sort of just... Yeah.
And that's actually, I described that in the article, which I'm going to share, which I dug out off an old hard drive. It's about evolution of Shiatsu Touch. I wrote it in the late 80s, and I read it the other day. I thought, wow, that's still worth sharing. And it's got a description of exactly that.
I probably disagree with
You probably disagree.
But he was doing lots of off the body stuff.
He was,
and that's what a lot of people have stuck in their minds, because it was very mysterious, apparently.
Yes, yeah. Although, I've got other stories about Kishi. He actually gave me a treatment which was very sweet in Rome when we were both presenting it there.
He told me.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. He was very sweet. offered to give me a treatment. I thought, yeah, sure, yeah, and yeah, it was a very, very interesting experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and it was so kind of him. We were both presenting in Rome at the Rome Shiatsu Congress, and also I'm responsible for new energy work. It was my idea back in 1999, I think it was. I came up with the idea, so that's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, so let's find out how familiar you are with Pauline Sasaki's work. Let's get this poll up. We've got a couple of polls to see how familiar you are with Pauline's work and with Kishi's work. So let's just run this poll and see what we get. Very, a little, and not familiar.
Of course, you might not know if you are. That's partly what I'm interested.
That is true, actually, yes, because
it's not always clear to people coming into Shiatsu where your teachers have come from and what the influences were. True. So there might be more than you think.
I think that's definitely true in the UK because you're so influential with all the Shiatsu schools in the UK. But anyway, let's see. We've got 23% not familiar. So we've got nearly a quarter saying not familiar.
So that's really
and
interesting.
54 a little, and again about a quarter. It's a perfect bell curve there. 25% very. So yeah, that's really interesting.
So I think knowing a bit more about her would be maybe interesting to you.
Yes, I will share what I can this evening. Okay, what about Kishi? Let's find out. Okay, same question. What about Kishi? Let's see how he fares. If you'd like to vote for that, we'll see if it's a similar thing or whether it's different.
It's more even. That might
similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Similar.
I know a lot of people have come into Seiki since Kishi died, but so you may not be certain whether you can say that you're familiar with his work or Seiki. I know that's a bit of a judgment call, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about the same, but there's a few not so familiar there.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about Kishi's. Okay, tradition and descent. Okay, we've got some slides here for that. So here are the four main characters. So Hashi could be here, but we focused on the four main characters in this in the story, in this particular story.
In the pond we move in, I suppose. Because there is a sort of bigger pond of Shiatsu.
There is a huge pond. Yeah, that's right. And this is just where we are.
Yeah.
So obviously Namakoshi is the originator of Shiatsu in Japan. You're not really sure about that?
Well, no, yes and no, because it's quite hard to really pinpoint. I mean, Kishi was keen to try and pinpoint the beginning of Shiatsu, but that was actually very hard to do.
Yeah.
Because there were so many influences coming in from Japan and the West. And so, but I think we can say that Namakoshi he was a great showman.
Right.
And he loved being on TV.
Yeah.
And he loved his celebrity clients, the famous one being Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had this 3-minute Shiatsu TV slot regularly on TV.
Wow.
So his whole passion was popularizing it. So
right.
But Shiatsu had been, obviously it means finger pressure.
Yeah.
But the word had been used, but it hadn't been set, if you like. It hadn't been defined. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
But Namakoshi came along and he took the word that was already being used and he said, well, this is what it is.
Right.
And he was so public.
Yes.
And with the help of Masunaga and a team of academics, Shiatsu people, particularly these guys, they, in the 50s, 60s, they actually worked to define it. Whether they were successful or not is, I think, a whole other story.
Okay.
But they had to get a license.
Yes, right.
Because the American administration in Japan was insisting that there be licenses. I'm a bit rusty on this now, but for traditional therapies, and they wanted one of their own. They didn't want to be lumped in with anybody else.
Right.
So they wanted they said Shiatsu does something different from massage, or it's very different. So we have to have our own license. Right. And at that point, driven so often by outside forces, you have to define yourself.
Yes.
So then these guys got together And Masunaga, of course, was an academic. So
yes,
but there were other really I don't know who exactly, I can't remember, but there was quite an impressive team doing a study.
I remember that, because it basically showed that it affected the autonomic nervous system, didn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what they chose to call it.
Yes, exactly.
But they could definitely say that there was a difference between massage and shiatsu.
Yes.
So that, in a sense, that's the birth of shiatsu as a named
therapeutic approach,
a possible profession in a way.
Yeah,
and very public, because Namakoshi, look, his thumbs.
Yeah, look at that.
Now, apparently, he really did have huge thumbs.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And Kishi said his touch was wonderful. His hands were just...
I've heard that.
Just big, soft, gorgeous touch. And so he was tremendously influential.
Yeah.
And he set up the Japan Shiatsu College, which was the only place you could get licensed, probably still is, in Japan as a shiatsu practitioner.
There we are, you see, that's it. And Masunaga was, of course, one of his very early students.
Well, he had his own route into shiatsu, actually.
Yeah.
He was certainly one of the first teachers at the school.
Yeah.
But he was doing his own thing. And Kishi...
Well, even early on.
Yeah. And Kishi said, because Kishi joined in 1967, as a young man.
Yes. Into the Namakoshi school?
Yes, into the Namakoshi school.
Right.
And because he'd also had his own route. Masunaga's mother had been a practitioner, and she'd taken him. She decided that Masunaga was going to be a shiatsu practitioner, even though Masunaga wasn't quite sure he wanted to be.
Right. So it was his mother's idea. There we are.
Mum.
You see.
Yeah. And
mothers are always right, though.
Really?
No, I'm not sure about that. That's just a saying. That's an English saying, by the way.
Yeah,
we usually have a chat. Yeah.
In case that we've got, feel free to comment or ask as we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm hogging the...
Yes, no, go on, yeah.
So Masunaga had his own way in. Namakoshi had come in through treating his mum, because his mum was very unwell when she was a child. When he was a child.
Yeah.
So he'd started pressing her and figuring out what helped.
Yeah.
And so everyone had their own roots in. Kishi's father was a judo champion. He was a businessman too, but
all right, wow.
And part of judo was often hands-on work, quite
manipulative.
It's a bone setting type.
So he came from that background.
So he came from that. So Kishi said that as a boy he used to do little treatments on people and get pocket money.
Oh really? He was a boy.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
So he went off to study landscape architecture, which is a big deal in Japan at Tokyo University.
Oh really? Kishi did that, did he? At university?
And then he sort of went off to Namakoshi school while he was in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Got acceptance, which was quite a big deal. You had to be, you really had to come from a family of practitioners. You couldn't just walk off the street, really. You had to be picked up and kind of chosen.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
And then he went to classes, and there was one class run by Masunaga that was packed.
I heard that he was really popular in the school.
And it's like people, what's he doing?
Yeah.
And he was teaching philosophy and psychology and in its relationship with shiatsu.
Because when I was with Pauline, I was there for 3 months and I did a full-time apprenticeship. But one of the things I did was I sorted out all her office, and I found all these notes from the very early days, Masunaga notes that have not been published. I've still got them next door, and they're all stuff like that, philosophical ideas about the nervous system and stuff like that. I think it'd be interesting to go through them one time and just have a look at them.
But it's in Japanese?
No, it's in English, because they were things that he prepared.
She wrote it, did she? Or?
No, Masunaga wrote them to present his work when he went to the Ohashi school in New York. Yeah, the famous workshops where he brought his stuff to America.
That's right, and Canada. He went to Canada too.
Yeah, that's right, he did.
I've met people who, 40, I don't know how many years later, still say, "Oh, Masunaga's touch." It was wonderful.
Oh, right. Yeah. Anyway, so interesting. Okay, so that's how Kishi got into it. I didn't know that. She was into landscape gardening and then got into Namakoshi school and then went to Masunaga's lectures in the school. That's the link.
And then Masunaga left Namakoshi school pretty much then and there.
Right.
Pretty much when Kishi not long after Kishi joined. So Kishi went to Masanaga's postgraduate school and Namakoshi school and university all at the same time.
Oh, did he? He was doing it all the time?
Yeah.
Same time? Oh my God. Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay, well this is where the Pauline Sasaki link comes, because she studied with Ohashi originally and ended up becoming a senior instructor in his school.
But when was that?
That would have been when he set the school up. Let me just think. That was just before. I'd have to look at the dates, but it must have been the late 70s, I suppose, or mid 70s, I suppose.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd be very interested if anybody on this
might
chat
know. Might know. Because the thing, well, come to think of it, it must have been earlier than that, because I met her in the early 80s and she was already left Ohashi's by then.
Yeah.
So it must have been during the 70s, sometime in the 70s.
As I understand from Kishi, because he was trying to remember this when we were writing the book.
Yeah.
He was making links that he hadn't bothered to think about since then. He'd left it all behind him.
Yeah.
And he was saying, well, through the 70s, he was in Europe a lot. He was in Hawaii, he was in Europe, but he was always coming back to Masanaga, always. Right. That was his anchor.
Right.
Coming back to Masanaga. He was also, he was kind of Masanaga's right-hand man. He wasn't there all the time.
That's what I heard. That's what Pauline told me.
Yeah,
she said that he was just like first disciple.
He was really, although Kishi describes himself as having been a stupid student, he was always asking the dumb questions that nobody else wanted to ask, and but he nonetheless his touch was exceptional, and so he would be always coming back. But by the late 70s, Kishi was in a crisis with the work.
Yes.
And he was coming to the end of being able to really feel that Shiatsu was his way.
Yes.
But at that time also, because Masanaga died in 1980 or
81, I think. Yeah.
At that time, Westerners, so Ohashi in the late 70s wrote, he'd been reading Masanaga's books because he was American, but he could read Japanese.
Right, yeah.
And so he was self-taught, as I understand it from Kishi. He taught himself a lot. And
this is Ohashi, you mean?
Yeah. Yes, and Masanaga, because Kishi was always traveling around the world, Masanaga said, well, go and see. I've had this letter from this guy in New York. And according to Kishi, Masanaga wasn't really interested in teaching Westerners particularly. He had his own thing going. He wanted to, Masanaga's great ambition was that Shiatsu should be on a university syllabus.
Oh, really? Oh, right.
And he achieved it right at the end of his life, and then it was dropped.
All right, wow. Okay.
But that was, he had his own ambitions. He had, I think, was it 2 branches of the yokai? I may have got that wrong. But he was based in Japan, and he wasn't especially interested in being elsewhere. So he got this letter from Ohashi.
Yeah.
So there's this young man. Why don't you go and see him?
Yes.
And so Kishi went to New York and met Ohashi.
Oh, he went over there like an ambassador kind of thing, or just
it was a friendly thing. Check him out. Go and see this guy. Right. Kishi said he was delightful. He thought he was a lovely young man with lots of talent, and and he was a real pleasure. And he was an English graduate at Ohashi.
Oh, right. I didn't know that. Yeah. But that must have been around the same time that Pauline translated the books in Shiatsu with Ohashi.
It must have been, everything must have happened quite quickly in the late 70s.
Yes.
Because Ohashi and presumably Pauline, but certainly Ohashi went to Tokyo, met with Masanaga, but Masanaga, all this is according to Kishi, but it's pretty good source, so it's probably not much better.
Yeah.
Masanaga was too busy. He didn't really, he didn't have the time to be dealing with these numbers of Westerners that were coming.
All right, yeah.
So Kishi had a flat in an apartment in the middle of Tokyo, and people would come and stay there.
All right, yes.
Kishi always says they all owe him money.
As Pauline told me about that. Pauline told me about that. She said it was packed. Everyone was like lying on the floor in sleeping bags.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah, she told me about that. Yeah. So she must have gone there. She must have gone at that time. Yeah, she must have done. Yeah.
So Kishi would teach these Westerners. So Masanaga was busy elsewhere. So Kishi would show them things.
Yeah.
But at that point, Kishi was moving away from Masunaga.
Oh, I see.
So
Right. Yeah.
it was a funny time of change.
Yes.
So in fact, Kishi taught them quite a lot.
As a sort of senior member of the
Yeah.
staff there.
Yeah.
But I have to say that for all his reluctance, from what I've heard from not just from Pauline, but also from Kiku Zutrao as well,
Yeah.
who was there translating, because I haven't seen Kiku for years, but I used to teach
Yeah.
for her. I used to teach her in Boston like twice a year, right through the late 80s and into the 90s in Boston. So I was quite close to her. And she used to come over with Pauline. at the
Yes,
beginning.
I remember.
Remember in the early
Yeah,
days?
I think she gave me a treatment.
Quite possibly, yeah. But I mean, they told me that Masunaga was actually, when he got to New York and actually saw the number of students, he was like really excited because he had like 150 people in the room.
It was a revelation.
Yeah, so it's like, whoa, I'm a superstar kind of thing. So I think that changed everything. That changed that. And Pauline said that because she studied with him, that's right, it's coming back to me now. She studied with him in Japan. So she must have, she said that he gave a lot more to the New York work, a lot of information and new ideas because of just the excitement, I think, of having so many people, than he did at Iokai, where it was more kind of regular, so day-to-day things. Anyway, we could be talking forever now. I hope this is interesting.
Is this
for
interesting for people?
Please put a thumbs up in the chat just to give us some kind of encouragement. That
we're sort of putting it together from our joint memories.
Together, Okay, well, that's good. We've got a few thumbs up. Okay, we'll continue with the slides. Okay, so from that, we just wondered about this whole tension, because people get very, very upset, don't they, when things change? They do.
Yeah.
It's a human thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess Kishi and Pauline, I mean, they created a lot of change. I mean, I think one of the things that strikes me is that some of it comes from Masunaga's energy, because he was always developing things, wasn't he? He was always working on things, and he wasn't one of these people that just stuck to the traditional material, whatever that might be. So I think that Kishi and Pauline are both in that lineage of like, okay, let's see if we can work on this. Let's see if we can develop it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, certainly Masunaga was determined. He was not satisfied with the definition they came up with for the license.
Oh, I see.
Some of them were. There was an argument, and I believe that Namakoshi went along with, was that we've got the license, now let's just do what we do.
Right. Okay. Well, there is an argument for that.
There's an argument for that.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, Masunaga was like, no, we've got to have theory that matches the reality.
Right. Okay.
Not just this bit of Western stuff, because they were using Western anatomy and physiology and ideas of whatever you said before, which has gone straight out of my mind, the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
To describe what went on in Shiatsu, and Masunaga was just not. It's not quite right. We're not quite there, are we? So he was playing with different ideas from psychology. He was very interested. I think we talked before about Carl Rogers.
Yes.
And whether you could use this idea of unconditional positive regard from Carl Rogers.
Yes.
And Freud, he was interested in all this stuff. Could you use this theory?
There's stuff in those notes as well, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And his question was, can I use this Western psychology theory, which actually I think is quite a good fit in some ways, to describe actually Shiatsu? But then he abandoned that.
All right, yeah.
And he also drew from Japanese acupuncture, but maybe there's been a little misunderstanding, I sometimes think, there, because it's not just meridians slapping the whole bundle of theory onto Shiatsu. It's not acupuncture without needles. It's something different. But he was nonetheless drawing from that theory to see if he could develop something. But it was all work in process. He died when he was young. Yes. And he was developing all the time.
Yeah.
And Kishi said he was going towards a much more spiritual path.
Yes.
Just in the last little bit.
Yes.
And that he recognized in Kishi's work something that also,
There's a famous thing that I've seen written down as well, which is that that towards the end of his life, he said his only regret was he wished he'd worked more on the soul rather than other aspects of the body. But there's so much. I mean, we could have a whole discussion just about the innovations of Masunaga, but let's just move on now, and because we want to do some practical work. And now here it is, Seiki and the quality of touch. There we are. And I don't think there are any slides. Oh yes, there is just one slide, isn't there?
Yes. Birgit says, I wonder how Kishi's change in working came from traditional meridian system work to the free Seiki work. We asked a couple of questions actually. I was wondering who was the first person to start a treatment with Hara diagnosis.
Let's do this first one first. This is biggie,
yeah. Hi there. Actually, nice to see you.
Yeah, it's lovely to see Biggie on the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how Kishi's change in working came. Well, what he told me was that he was determined to do Shiatsu correctly. He wanted to be not a great Shiatsu, he didn't want to be great, but he wanted to take it as far as he possibly could and do Shiatsu properly. So actually, this is how tradition and descent comes into it.
Yes.
He was a traditionalist in that, to the extent that there was a Shiatsu tradition that early on,
yes,
he wanted to be in it. He had no desire to leave Shiatsu.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's not the kind of feeling I got. The feeling was that he wanted to. That later on, he wanted to push away.
That was after. He gave that impression a lot in subsequent years, because he was. For us, we can go into that. But as a student, as a young man in the 70s, he wanted to perfect his Shiatsu.
Right.
He wanted to learn from Masunaga and perfect his Shiatsu.
Right. Okay.
And this is what he recommends to Shiatsu people. He would have recommended to this. Perfect your Shiatsu before. If you want to do anything, stay where you are and learn that, because it was only when he pushed Shiatsu and got as good as he felt he could. It wasn't that he then thought, I think I'll go and do something else. It exploded. He couldn't do it any longer.
Right.
It stopped having meaning for him.
Right.
And he reached a dead end, and he couldn't do it. It was no longer his truth.
Right. Interesting, yeah. But you said, I think there was also, Pauline definitely gave me the impression that he had some kind of spiritual experience,
a
big spiritual experience that kind of turned his whole perception of energy around.
That's right. He had a breakdown, really, physical, mentally. He just stopped. He stopped doing Shiatsu. He shut himself in his apartment, and he did a lot of Shinto practice. He wanted to know what the truth was.
Oh, right, okay.
And he had an awakening. He had a realization, and the next time somebody called him on the phone, he found he could do things like he could treat at a distance, he could treat from photographs.
Yes.
But then he realized that's all just showmanship.
Yes.
But what came out of that was Seiki. It was just what his hands did next.
Right,
it was this realization. So it wasn't a desire to move on at all.
Yeah. Let's have another question. We've got Nathan. I was wondering who was the first person to start a treatment with Hara diagnosis. That's a good question, actually, because if you look at Masunaga, he tends to go sitting position. If you look at the kata, it's like sitting position, back diagnosis, actually, visual back diagnosis and stuff like that. I think it might have been Pauline, because she...
it predates that a long way.
Do you think it was Kishi did that?
No, there's a long tradition of Hara work.
Right.
But it became a very rarefied thing. I can't remember what the name of it was even restricted by legislation to a certain category.
Oh, like Ampuku type of thing.
Yeah, it wasn't Ampuku though. It was begins with a K. It's in the book somewhere. But I didn't explain it very well in there. I was a bit brief. There was a whole practice of Hara work, and it's a whole sort of noble tradition of Hara work. It's the most profound work.
All right. Okay. So there is a tradition in there. We've got traditions.
There is. Before Shiatsu, there was a tradition of Hara work. I don't know if you want to say it's the same as Shiatsu, but there's a continuation from medieval Japan.
Right. Okay. So it goes back a long way. Look, Chris says Kishi told me that he left the original Shiatsu work also because it was too much tension coming up in the body worker who did Shiatsu. Yeah. I don't know if you heard of that. Have you?
Yeah. He also he could give many reasons, but it was no longer he didn't see a change, a fundamental change in his clients. He saw he saw them getting better,
Yeah.
but then they get ill again. So what he was he realized he was looking for is a deep change, maybe a spiritual change.
Right.
And he wasn't seeing that either in himself or in them, and it was all too tight. And Masunaga at the end of his life was working in a very hard way as well.
Sure. Yes.
It started out much softer.
Carol says it's more of a statement than a question. She says, "So wish the spiritual side was incorporated into Shiatsu teachings." Well,
it is. I'm here.
Well, I would say that since Pauline Sasaki, it has been. I mean, that's it. This is a Reiki question. It's Reiki's different, isn't
actually,
it?
no, it is completely different.
Yeah.
But Kishi was in touch with one of the main early, one of the first. I think there were two. I don't know much about Reiki, I have to say, but in Hawaii, Kishi, he was in touch with the early Reiki people, and they wanted him to join them.
Oh, did he?
But Reiki is completely different. This is channeling, and so it's completely different. But he had a lot of respect for what they were doing, and he really loved how democratic it was. Anyone could do this. Why aren't you doing something so simple?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a few more comments really rather than questions. There's a Chinese system that works just on the Hara's whole treatment, a bit like Ampuku.
Yeah. Campo,
I think it's Panayota says.
Yeah,
that was, I think it was it.
It wasn't Campo. No, it wasn't Campo that I was
something
talking
else,
about. No, it was a particular class of practitioner that was allowed to touch the Hara.
Oh, okay. Following up, Nathan just says, I'd be interested to know more about the katas before that, because there are the different katas, aren't there? So I think we should take the opportunity before we get flooded with any more questions. Let's do some practical work.
My hands are now frozen. Sorry.
Oh, are they?
It's talking.
Yeah, no, it's just sitting and talking, isn't it? Okay, so the reason. Well, this is my experience. I wanted to tell you this, which is basically, I mean, I've given tutorials to quite a lot of Shiatsu practitioners over the years in various countries, and quite a lot of them have studied with Kishi. And I noticed something, because I noticed that there's a particular quality of touch that was common to all the people that studied Seiki. And I can't really describe it other than to say that it had a non-directive depth to it that was almost all-encompassing, in the sense that it kind of left space for there not to be a need to do anything. That's the closest I can get to describe it. Okay, something like that. It's something like that. And I noticed it. I noticed it quite a few times, and I thought that's very interesting. So I thought, why don't we do a little bit of practical work together? And I'd be very interested to know if you work on me doing something, and maybe you can just describe how you do it and why that might occur. That kind of touch might occur. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer, but I can have a go.
No, I'm not even suggesting there is an answer, but it's all just the process, isn't it? Let's just see. So we've got another camera set up here, because we're ever so technical here, and talking stopped, so that must be this one. Yeah, here, look, there we go.
Yeah.
We've got another camera, so we've got this one,
okay.
So we can do some practical work. So it's actually just 25 to, so if we just spend like 5 or 10 minutes doing this, and then we'll see.
Yeah, so we haven't really got around to talking much about touch, but I mean, again, you have to come back to the practical. So that's very interesting what you say. Cliff asked me the other day why it is, or how do you have that spacious feeling? Because that's I often hear that idea about spaciousness in touch, and that's often what I'm kind of partly looking for when students work on me, and I'm trying to see what they're about, because in Seiki there isn't the doing to, there isn't the fixing.
No.
And that gives space, well, like you said, it gives space for things to unfold.
Okay.
But how do you do that?
Yes.
It's partly by not doing.
I knew you were going to say something like that.
So, yeah.
So how do you do the non-doing?
How do you do it? But without it being doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like we circle around to this on a regular basis. Yeah. Now, another response I had to Cliff's question was that it is also in knowing that a person is not the body. Because what we were going to talk about later as well is that the ideas you have about people show up in your touch.
Yeah.
So if you fundamentally think, and I think a lot of modern society seems to believe this anyway, that a person is this stuff. Fundamentally, that's what a person is. It shows up in your touch.
Right.
Because when you go to touch somebody, you're touching the stuff, you're touching the body, and maybe it's more sophisticated, maybe it's the emotions as well, the emotion body.
Yeah.
And subtle layers of that. But for me, and for Kishi, for sure, the person is something quite different. It's another dimension. So that when I touch you, I'm addressing that one, that real person. Even though there's a lot of physical stuff going on, subtle physical stuff, 99% is touching, is working with that. But I'm doing it on your behalf. And that makes for I think that makes for a very different experience. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're kind of, it's like our real human, our real, underneath all that stuff, we're kind of teaming up and working together.
Okay.
And touching all this other stuff allows the real person to come forward.
Right. Yes.
And that's, for me, what health is.
Right. Yes.
The real person steps forward, and then there is no problem.
Yes.
My mind, my body, no problem is what Kish used to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do some.
Master cold hands. My
Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah. So if I were to then say, well, how do you actually have a situation in which there is space? Because you do space? I don't know. I'm asking myself that question. You don't have to answer.
Yeah.
But I think some of it is also transmission. It has to be transmission. And there is a transmission from, I don't know, it's not considered a good thing to say teacher, but I know what I mean by teacher, from teacher to student or client, from practitioner to client. It's like if you have space, the person will feel space, and then they'll carry that with them.
Yeah.
In a sense, maybe that is the spiritual side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. So that's not something you choose or not. You have it or you don't.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But to develop that, the question for me is, what's here?
What's where?
What's here? Anywhere.
Oh, here.
Here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, what's really here?
Right. Okay.
Apart from my ideas. If I was thinking, this is, yes, I know what that and this and, stomach and...
Right, yeah.
But rather than that, I go, I'm not... You all sit over there. All my ideas. You sit over there. And just
your ideas?
Yeah, my ideas.
Yes. Yeah, okay, yeah.
What I'm actually interested in is in this life.
Okay.
This life. This life, not another life, not an idea of life, but this life.
Okay.
And just what is this life? Or who is this life? They're koans.
It sounds a bit like a clearing thing in itself, clearing out preconceptions.
Yeah. And you can, it comes a point, as you know, when you've done this a while, you don't necessarily have to ask yourself these questions.
No.
But when I started out, I was always asking myself these questions. What's really here?
Okay.
What's really here? Right here is the breathing. There's this feeling of space in the wrist. The breathing, of course, is very obvious. And then, as you stay with just what you can actually experience, you actually find you don't really need anything else. You don't need the theories. You might have them as sort of backup a bit. But actually what you really have is a whole landscape which is opening up to you. And what more do you want? There are paths. And there are paths running all over the place. Increasingly, I can see why Keisha used to do this off the body thing.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, you can see it, and it's moving. Maybe you don't need to touch it. Why would you touch it? It's like, why would I touch a mountain stream or a path through a forest? What does that add? It might be a little blocked. The stream might be blocked. So maybe there's a feeling in that blockage of it wants to move, it wants to unblock. It's almost like the water is pushing blockage already. And my response to that pushing is it calls me not to unblock it or not to push it, but to join it, that movement, to just join the movement. Now, of course, to do that, you've got to spend quite a lot of time not knowing what on earth you're doing.
Well, that's a requirement, isn't it? Yeah.
You've got to have a lot of sweaty times when you think, are they going to pay me at the end of this? But they generally do because they're very polite.
It's interesting though, because just for a moment there when you were describing that, and you were describing the stream thing,
Yeah.
that was when what I would call, I felt like a kind of resonance between us. Like it was a moment where we were both kind of one system kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely part of it. And it's part of the healing encounter in a way that space is created.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
And when you're walking together.
Yeah.
But you see, in Seiki, there's no need for anything more because that's the fulfillment, is the connection.
Yeah.
And the space, and then the stream unblocks itself. I mean, sometimes there's more call. There's a call to really touch. And there's a lot of misunderstanding in Seiki these days, without Keisha around, that touch has to be terribly light. When
you gave me that treatment in Rome, I mean, it felt pretty much like a Shiatsu treatment that I'm, used to. I would say it was a bit more spacious, but there was quite a lot of technique.
Yes, he would have done. He often did, and sometimes he didn't. Yeah. He was very versatile because he was always responding to that moment.
Yeah, it doesn't. In a way, the external doesn't matter, does it? In the end, I mean, that's the interesting thing. Let's just have a quick. I'm just going to put the slides up just so we can keep on track because it's so interesting. We could be here all night.
Yes. Oh, God, Lord, yes.
It's the time is speeding past. So this is what you were just saying, wasn't it? The Seiki touch. The person is not the body. What is a person? Not trying to do anything. Not trying to fix anything. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, next week we've got. This is a promo for next week. We've got a Pro and Premium session on advanced diagnosis. So what I'd be interested to just share with you is how I think that quality that you just described has been built in and within the system of it. So this we're talking about this theory dependence of observations. Yeah. So this is from philosophy of science. Basically, is that you don't just observe stuff. You don't observe it in a completely innocent way kind of thing. The body, and this also goes in a completely non-structured way, because your belief system, just like you said, your belief about what a person is will influence how you approach that person, and so your concept of what a person is affects that. Oh my goodness, look at all the questions.
I
There's
know,
16 questions. Oh my goodness me. Okay, so look, I think what we ought to do, the book club, no, that comes later. What I'd like to do is I'd just like to, we've got 45 minutes left. I think what I'd like to do is I just want to do a demo on you of how Pauline changes the horror diagnosis. Okay. just so that we both have a chance to write down. How does that feel?
Exactly.
It's interesting because one of the things that Pauline taught was the whole alignment thing, and it's very similar, right? In the sense that you clear out your own energy field. That's the kind of idea. So you kind of just like you're coming from that kind of space where you're relaxing and quieting down what's happening in yourself. And again, so that goes back to the whole resonance thing, I think, so that you're not the dominant one in the whole thing. When I was with Pauline, I was apprenticing with her, I had to do this like 8 times a day. She got me to do this, horror diagnosis like this. I was only allowed like that much time to do it, and I had to write it down, and she would test me after to see what I got. So I had to learn how to do etheric horror diagnosis very, very quickly. But she also then built it back into the touch. And the interesting thing that links, I think, with the way that the touch resonated with my whole body when you did touch me, kind of thing, is that what the expansive quality in the touch does is it takes you away from the person being the body, the horror being this physical thing. You know what I mean? So there is something in there that I definitely know that came through Pauline's, use of what the insights that Kisha gave her. So, for example, and what I did with that is because Pauline and I were teaching together, and my role was kind of to structure that into technique. So what I did with it was I came up with the idea of body scanning, which is basically connecting with the whole resonance of the whole field, and also expanding the information in the touch away from being dominant on the physical level. Okay, and so basically that the way Pauline described it was contraction expansion. So if I contract the touch, and again, if you have the idea that this is a physical thing, that will influence the touch, and it will be something like that, Whereas if we bring in that more expanded touch, the idea is that what we're doing is we're basically creating a space quite similar to what you did, which is this open space. The only difference is we are placing a hand on an area that has meaning, heart meridian, whatever you want to call it. So basically what we're doing is we're basically connecting, resonating, but we're not narrowing it down to the physical body. We're allowing the space for that meridian or whatever to talk to us, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how I interpreted the way that Pauline took the more pure kind of resonant space and restructured it back in to expand and again descent again. It changed the whole way that we think about what we're doing in Shiatsu. And that extended also into the treatment and everything as well. But I think we better get on with those questions because we've got to talk about the book club, and I want to talk about what's going to happen next week as well. And it's just been so interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it so far as much as we have. So let me just, I'm going to just bring the camera back so that we're looking at the same camera. Here we go. So it's this one, isn't it? No, it's the other one. Yeah, we're back. Okay, cool. Right, here we go. Let's put the slides up. Should we have a look at some of these questions?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Let's have a look. Isn't horror work derived or connected to Ampuku?
Read the book, see what maybe you have done, but maybe I don't know.
Actually, we've got a poll on that. We can run that poll now. Actually, have you read the book? Let's find out straight away. Have you read the book, Seiki Life in Resonance, the book club book?
If not, why not? No.
Let's just find out. You might actually, you might not, because that could solve a lot of the questions. Just read the book.
Yeah.
Oh, look, quite a few people have, though. Look, over half have actually read it. That's
Yeah.
Oh, it's evening out. It's about 50-50 now. It's a race.
There's a whole section, this is a bit of a sell, there's a whole section on history.
Right, okay.
Which you may find interesting. Well, I hope you would, if you're interested in shiatsu.
Yeah.
I've got the plant coming out of my head.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, look, I've got another one.
Okay.
If you have read it, what did you think of it?
Be honest. It's
Be
okay.
honest, yeah.
We
Did you
don't
think
know
it was
who's saying
fantastic,
what.
good, neutral, or terrible? I said to Alice, I think it was all four of those things in different times.
Neutral.
Yeah. No one said it's terrible yet. They're so
Not yet.
polite. They're so
Yeah,
polite, aren't they?
Well, maybe no one thinks that.
Maybe never thinks it. No, I didn't.
No.
I didn't really think it was terrible. I'm just joking, right? Okay, so here we go.
Okay.
Let's get back to the all the questions and see what we've got. We've got 17 now. They're coming in faster than we can possibly answer them, I think.
Yeah.
Where are they? Oh, they're coming in faster than we can answer. Let's have a look.
10 times.
I've read it 10 times.
More.
I've read it 10
Rob,
times.
Bob, hello,
10
Bob. It's nice to know you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, look, this is a conversation I've wanted to hear.
So 2 from America.
Yeah,
Three
fantastic.
Okay.
How is Kishi's touch different from Shiatsu touch? I learned with Imma Bonnet, and she thought the touch as a non-doing thing. And that's interesting because Imma Bonnet is one of my students who's taught in Barcelona, and I taught there a lot there for her. And she was influenced by Kishi as well. So and very much by Pauline. So
there's a very definite difference in that there's no diagnosis and then treatment.
No.
And that feels very different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more of a pure thing, isn't it? It's more of a pure thing. Whereas, do you see landscape changes in pictures? Yeah, I thought that was an interesting question. I mean, when you said that you're drawn to things or whatever, do you have any sense? Do you translate it into any senses, like kinesthetic sense or the visual sense? Do you
eventually, I find that the senses all merge. Actually, this has been quite an interesting thing for me. I find that you can no longer differentiate. Oh, I can, but there's a sense in which hearing, all the senses are the same. Am I hearing that or am I seeing that? Am I feeling that or am I almost tasting it? It's a curious business.
Interesting, because Pauline and I worked on synesthesia for a long time in terms of energy awareness, which is to do with exactly that. I mean, some people have this thing where they translate things into different senses. Right, here we go. Especially like the aspect focus attention in Shiatsu, as it sometimes gets lost. Yeah, that's more of a comment, really. Thank you so much for this. Yes, mountain stream. Karen liked the mountain stream things. Are you just talking about immediate experiences, Shuddhaba? Oh,
I think that's. You mean when I was working? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, crucial.
Yes, to be there. I noticed that. Yeah.
Right here.
Look how ruddy his complexion got. I'm not going to mark that up. Are you merging? That's an interesting question, isn't it?
There isn't. There's a together, but you have to be two people.
Yes.
So there's a kind of merging in that in the way that you might, if you're a really good dancer, I imagine, or really good at doing anything physical, like surfing or something, you'd have to, in a sense, merge to a point, but you're still you.
Yeah. I think that's really important. It's not merging, it's resonance, which is it's like if you have two systems that resonate together, they become one system, but that is transcendent to the individuality of the two people. Yeah. So that's the are you merging question.
Real person.
Oh yes, here we go. This one for you. Shuddhaba says, can you say a bit more about by the real person? It sounds a bit fixed and ultimate.
That sounds like you think the fixed and ultimate is bad, but well, yeah, the real person is another dimension. So actually, no, I can't say very much about it. But there's my experience of life and people, and certainly Kishi's, and it's a spirit. It's a religious way of seeing the world for sure, and I appreciate not everybody sees the world like that. But it's my experience that there's all this stuff, and then there's also the true individual.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. Where can I get Kishi's book? We'll be coming on to that in a minute. All popular bookshops. Let's have a look. We've only got 5 minutes left.
Amazon, if you believe in Amazon, you can get it anywhere.
Yeah. And we were going to just, let's just have a quick. Yeah, here we go. So this is the book club. Yes, which is what we're it's your new idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
and we've done these
done
polls.
that, done that.
Here's the book. Here's the cover. Yeah. So what's the idea behind the book club?
Well, the book was published in 2011. So that's actually 11. It's a while back now. And Kishi died in 2012. So that's 10 years ago. And I have hardly picked up the book since then. I gave it to the publisher and handed it in, and they did their thing.
Yeah.
And I've not felt the need or the interest in picking it up, actually, because it was like...
So much work.
Well, no, it's in here, and I went and just did my thing after that.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of come around. People talk a lot about it to me sometimes. They ask about it, and I don't really think about it. But it feels like I'm really interested in picking it up again.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I'm very conscious of is that as soon as I gave it to the publisher, as soon as it was published, it was no longer ours. It belonged to the world. You can't keep a book. No. People interpret it their way.
True. Yeah.
And you can never have any control about that. And there was some anxiety. Maybe Kyoko had some anxiety in particular that people
Kyoko is
Kishi's wife.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was some feeling that, we should try and make sure people understood it correctly. But you can't.
No, you can't. No.
So I thought it would be really appropriate to invite people along and actually read it together and see what I will be talking about it and talking about my experience and adding where I can to that. I mean, I've got hours of recordings that I made of me and Kishi talking about the book.
Oh, you've got audio recordings, have you?
Loads of it.
Oh, right. Wow, I didn't know that.
And
that could be released as an audio book.
No, because I sound like an idiot. but edit me out, and then maybe.
You would have to get an actor to put your bits in again.
But we sat for hours and hours and hours.
And you recorded it?
I recorded pretty much not absolutely everything, but I recorded. There were some things I wish I had recorded, which may come back to me one day.
Yeah.
And so it was my idea to. It's like stop for a chat with people. Okay, let's have a look at it. Let's go through it slowly. Can I add anything? Do you have any questions?
Right.
And so my idea was to do a little bit of talking, but also invite a wider audience to engage and ask their questions, make their comments, and relate, especially the later parts of the book where Kishi is talking, relate that to practice, see where we are now with 10 years on from Kishi's death.
Yeah.
Where are we now? Without the book, it would have been quite hard, I think, for Seiki to have continued.
Interesting, yeah. That's the role, isn't it? Books, isn't it?
And we have this trace.
Yes.
So it's very arbitrary. We thought 12 sessions. I'm doing it with my colleague René Fix from Germany. He's great. He's great at pulling things together, and he gets me talking, and he's got some ideas himself. So it seemed appropriate to have somebody a bit younger who's coming up to, because we need to take Seiki forward.
Absolutely.
And it's not just, we don't want to fix it.
No.
So
this is the structure, isn't it? Like every 2 weeks, Wednesday.
Every 2 weeks.
And it's online, I assume.
It's online.
Right? Yeah.
We're going to record the talks, not the chats, but the talks. And we'll also be putting people in smaller groups for short sessions of just sharing, so you can bring that back.
Yeah.
If you miss, people won't be able to go to all of them, I imagine.
Yeah.
But if you miss something, it will be on the website, and people who register can go back and look at that. Yeah. So you won't miss anything.
And Carola's going to drop in.
Carola's going to drop in. Nick's going to drop in at the beginning of next year, which would be fantastic. Those are the dates.
Here's the dates. So what I can do is I can share these slides, which have got the dates on if you want to, and download them. But they are all on the website. You'll find them anyway with links and stuff like that. And also, you've very generously given people who come on the webinar an extra discount. There's
an early bird discount on at the moment until the 8th, and then we're just giving you guys the chance to have an extra 5%. For a couple of days. That's just valid for a couple of days, actually, that 5%.
Yeah. Okay. So act now if you want to join it. I've got the link now. I can share it with you, and it will be on the. yeah, they'll be on the email that comes out as well.
And
so.
I'm really excited about it. I really would love to have lots of people
I'd like
sharing
to come
their
if I'm
experience.
invited.
I would like you to come for an evening
I would
too
love
and
to
talk,
drop in,
because
yeah.
I want to know where people are at, and this seems to be a great way to structure understanding what people understand, what they don't understand, what they want more of. So let's see. It's an experiment. I'm really excited about it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'd love to drop in, and yeah, if you'd like to, you can download the link now, and it'll be in the email if you'd like to join in. That'd be absolutely amazing. Okay, so it's actually, we've got to go. I know, we've got to go, and I just want to quickly say, next week we've got advanced diagnosis. I'm going to deconstruct the whole diagnosis based on what we just did here. Have a whole hour to do it.
Theorize it.
Yeah, I'm going to actually show how we did it. How to increase the range of information in diagnosis. It's going to be very practical, and it's for professional premium members. So those of you who are already members of New Energy Work, subscribing members, we'll be sending the link out soon, any day. So it'd be great too. The program for the whole autumn's coming out very soon too. Okay, we've got to go. I just want to say thank you to everyone for your time. It's been so interesting. I mean, the chat and the questions has been amazing, absolutely amazing. And I hope you've really. I've learned so much myself. I really have. It's amazing when you get together.
Nice, and share. There's so much more.
There is so much more.
Oh, you have to just come to the book club.
Yeah.
Fumbi, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elaine.
Great.
Great.
I'm gonna I'll put a. Oh yeah, I've got preparation for. Whoops. I think have I got a handout I can give you? Let's just have a look. Yeah, here we go. This is just a last little gift here. The Evolution of Shiatsu Touch is a download there if you want that. That's an article I wrote in the late 80s.
I disagree with some of it. I beg you.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, I would be surprised if you do. I'm sure you.
I will write to you.
I'm sure you would disagree. I'll probably disagree myself if I read it, but we can go more into it next week. Okay, we've got to go.
Yeah.
2 minutes over. Thank you so much, and I just put a heart in the chat just from both of us.
Yeah.
And have a great evening, and hopefully see you next week at the diagnosis thing. Yeah, good. Look at all that lovely feedback. Okay, have a great evening and have a great week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.